bonsoir, hi, good evening. I'm Mirko Zardini, I'm director of CCA, and I have to say that tonight I'm very pleased. I have the opportunity to introduce a person who has a lot of different relationship with us and the CCA. He's a friend, he's a collaborator, he's inspiring us. Lars Müller, as you know, is known all over the world as a publishing house in Baden in Switzerland. Is one of the most interesting and important publishing house today, but the name of the publishing house is also the name of the founder, Lars Müller, and tonight Lars will introduce us to some of the vision that he has and question that he has about books. The title of tonight's lecture is addressing this problem of the book that in print that we have today. If this was not the end, and I imagine that the image we have on the screen already is referring to that, what is the future of print? Lars is a Norwegian. He moved to Switzerland and he founded the Lars Müller Publishing House in, I think, about 25 years ago. He, in a certain way, is older than the CCA, which is only 20 years old in this building. And he has been studying in the United States and in the Netherlands. And he is now working in Baden, but also teaching in Switzerland. He has worked with us for some books, and he's still working on the book which is the accompanying book of the exhibition, Some Ideas of Living in London and Tokyo, that is still on exhibit at CCA. With the CCA he has been involved, and he has been working on and publishing the book on the Herzog and the Meron, and also on Sense of the City. And I have to say that personally it has been really a pleasure to work with him. He's a very interesting experience to discuss books at different levels, at the strategic conceptual level and at the graphic level, the detail level, the printing level with Lars. I'm sure that his competence, you know that, but tonight I think that you also have the chance to be fascinated by his way of presenting this kind of topic. It's not easy to work sometimes with Lars because his question is, well, is it really necessary to do this book? Couldn't be better not to publish that. So, you know, he's always questioning the essence of the necessity of books. And of course, he's not loved sometimes, but people who think that publishing a book is a vanity problem and not something else. So these are some of the reasons that we are very pleased to have Lars today, and I'm sure that his presentation will raise a lot of questions to us, and I'm sure that at the end you are going to have a lot of questions about his points. So Lars, thank you very much, and join me in welcoming Lars at CCA. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Mirko, and thank you for the invitation to speak to you here. Thank you all for coming. I assume that we are a community of architects, designers, and more, but that we are all book lovers, and well, maybe that's the main thing to share tonight. I want to share two questions with you, which I carry with me kind of daily, and which are not easy to answer. They don't even expect to be answered immediately, but sometimes good to have some questions which keep you thinking. One is, as said, if this was not the end, what is the future of print? Many of us here remember how in the mid-90s the end of printing was loudly proclaimed, the golden age of the paperless office heralded as imminent. Much has changed since then, and not only the euphoric predictions so frequently heard in those days. In the meantime, we have become aware of the advantages and labor-saving opportunities offered by the Internet, but also of its limitations. I'm touching upon this only in passing, since our real topic is the book. I'll restrict myself to saying that the Internet has generated a genuine break in our understanding of the function of the book. It has estranged a substantial segment of the public from the traditional book medium. For the generations emerging since the 80s, who have grown up with the new electronic media and who have no memory of the historical rupture leading from the analog to the digital age, the book is simply one option among many for gaining access to stored information. For them, the book has become a nice-to-have item, one that is acquired or not, depending on its affordability and attractiveness. The book as a source of concentrated knowledge is now confronted by a well-developed and cost-free competition, one that has moreover substantially influenced and altered the public's behavior vis-à-vis reception and communication. And if most young people are perfectly content conducting research on the basis of whatever happens to be offered by Wikipedia and other data banks at the moment, then the future of the book looks gloomy. Needless to say, it is not just the range of publications that is diminished, the quality of discussion also becomes increasingly shallow. Turning to the topic of book publication, in particular the architectural book, we ought to keep this altered media reality in mind. The range of productions offered by publishers has already responded to these transformations. The interface between academic and popular publishing is far more sharply demarcated today than it was 20 years ago. Research-based publications are explicitly objective in tone and insist on the dialectic of reading and understanding. Popular publications on architecture, on the other hand, amount to little more than leisure time books, heavily illustrated and easily consumed. Between them yawns a gulf, one that deserves our increased attention. The number of purchasers of scholarly books is stagnating or falling. At the same time, the list of titles is growing. This development is only apparently paradoxical. On the whole, the output of books has remained roughly unchanged. Rationalized production technologies allow smaller first editions, and most titles have short lives. The flattening out of the range of offerings can be traced, on the one hand, to the fact that many publishers are producing variations of the same mainstream program, and that, on the other hand, no conceptual or material nor moral threshold prevents architects or designers or artists from documenting and presenting their production in book form. A publisher can always be found. Countless insignificant monographs clog the distribution channels, wasting scarce display space in bookshops, devouring the limited funds of purchasers. In light of this enthusiasm, anxieties over the end of the printed book must lie deeper. We know about the fatal evolution error of the dinosaurs which, in order to survive, grew excessively large, ultimately perishing. Aberrations of this kind perhaps explain the phenomenon of the oversized book, carried home like a suitcase and preserved like an item of furniture. Such objects are savored by nouveau riche dentists and speculators. The book as a medium does not benefit. I have no desire to idealize the book in relation to other media, but the book does have advantages, and these should be pointed out. Ever since the invention of the book and the possibilities of duplication, developments in knowledge, in the sciences, the arts, in philosophy, have consistently been documented and disseminated in book form. After its elite beginnings, the book has enjoyed an enormous boom during the past few centuries and has democratized knowledge. Our memories of the avant-gardes, the manifestos of their protagonists, the documentation of the various 20th century movements and tendencies from the Bauhaus to Archigram, all of this is stored in books. Those in possession of a personal library, in most cases also a mirror of their owners' biographies, of the formation of their consciousness, will regard themselves as fortunate. Despite the shrinking public, we should also hold fast to this tradition, even if such demands revive a certain aura of elitism. In their brief history, the digital media technologies have failed to develop a reliable and permanent storage technology that could be regarded as a serious alternative to the book as a repository of knowledge. With this background, I shall attempt to reflect critically on my 25 years of activity as a publisher. Naively at first, then with increasing awareness of what this claim involved, I called myself an independent publisher, meaning essentially that I claimed the freedom to initiate and develop book projects on the basis of my own concerns. It didn't escape me that during the same period, many publishers in my vicinity evolved into successful service providers. My principle of personal involvement set quantitative limits to growth. In place of growth in size emerged a competence, an inner growth, so to speak, one that today allows me to realize my personal intentions in changing partnerships with institutions, editors, and authors in the form of books with strong individual personalities. I won't deny that economic pragmatism has induced me to consider projects that could be realized without my participation, providing they advance our program in meaningful ways. On the whole, however, I have succeeded in defending the privilege of selectivity, a prerogative many publishers have sacrificed in search of higher yields. In collaboration with various authors and partners, I have succeeded in maintaining my conviction that each book must be endowed with as much individual character as a building. Above all, each book must represent itself and its contents, and not those of its originator, whether a museum or a publisher. This is by no means merely an ideal claim. The individuality of a book, that is to say, the appropriateness of its internal structure and external form to its contents, result in an aura. It is this aura which allows it to prevail in a brutally contested market. For this reason, I've never developed a corporate design, a logo or label for my publishing house. It seems likely that our identity is nevertheless communicated through our editorial stance and my own design style. On this recommendation, a number of the publications I've produced over the years, based on my own initiative or in collaboration with various institutions, have been remarkably successful. I want to outline my convictions on the basis of several such examples. Appearing in 1998 was a book that represented an international breakthrough for my publishing house and, in a sense, for the architects it featured as well. 2 years earlier, Peter Zumthor and I had decided to document his architectural work in a book, its publication to coincide with the completion of his thermal bath in Vals. This project harbored a variety of problems. The studio's photo archive was in a desolate condition and consisted of unusable fragments of various photographers. My first conceptual decision was to produce a unified photographic documentation. I commissioned a then little-known photographer, Hélène Binet, whose work Zumthor and I found striking. Characteristic of architectural photography in the 50s and 60s was the restriction to black and white, the exclusion of wide-angle lenses, and the use of exclusively natural light. On the basis of these restrictions, Binet attained the artistic freedom that distinguishes her images. She spent an entire summer in Switzerland producing a series of rare density. The second problem concerned the text and choice of author. At the time, Zumthor's name was so hot on the architectural scene that many world-renowned critics offered their services. Concerning choice of author, my view prevailed. I pointed out that external views on his work could be found in other media and proposed that Zumthor write the text himself, becoming the author of his own monograph. Zumthor writes beautifully, albeit with pathos, which is also how he speaks about architecture. A third problem concerned reproduction of his plans, which ranged from preliminary pencil drawings to digital renderings, traversing the entire spectrum of rapidly developing representational techniques. We decided on a generous presentation of authentic documents to contrast with Hélène Binet's new photo essay. Our friendship was sacrificed to the uncompromising result, and when the book finally appeared, I was almost bankrupt. But even today, I regard this publication as one of the most original and reliable monographs on a living architect. Subsequently, I collaborated with Hélène Binet on a number of architectural books on Zaha Hadid. In 2006, I commissioned her to photograph Peter Eisenman's Holocaust Memorial in Berlin. I've been working on other projects with Eisenman too. Okay. These titles share their origins in the initiative of their publisher and his willingness to take risks. Although the above-mentioned architects were already well known, there was no guarantee that sales receipts would cover the initial investment. Hence, the potentially enormous significance for publishers of joint ventures with museums. Provided the interest of museums or curator and publisher converge, the conditions already exist for a successful publication. One precondition is agreement on the book's independent character. Even when a specific exhibition is the occasion for publication, it is seldom appropriate to speak of a catalogue, even less so to produce one. Catalogues, which properly speaking exhaustively document the contents of an exhibition, have little chance of success on the international book market today. So it is possible to agree on a formula for a publication which coincides with and documents an exhibition, but also complements it in terms of content. Such a publication can attain a high degree of autonomy and enjoy market success. This point of view is all the more justified when the publisher is regarded not simply as a producer and business associate, but also as a jointly responsible partner who has been integrated into planning and conceptualization right from the start. One example of such a collaboration is this publication from 1999. The Zurich Museum of Design and its curator Claude Lichtenstein planned a 200-page publication to accompany an exhibition. Soft-covered and priced as reasonable as possible, it was to have contained texts by and about Buckminster Fuller and a selection of 100 illustrations. The aim of both exhibition and publication was to prevent the achievement of Fuller, who had died in 1983, from being forgotten. When I came into contact with Bucky's personality during a stay at the Fuller Archive in Santa Barbara and had an opportunity to examine his chronophiles and the wealth of documents held there, I decided to present my museum partner with a new and far more comprehensive concept. My participation in the project was redefined and an ambitious concept realized with the assistance of a sponsor sought out specifically for the publication. The volume also became a prototype for the visual reader, a type of book consisting of 2 parts, images and 1 part text, the visual component having the status of an autonomous narrative. There is an exhibition on Buckminster Fuller right now. I think it's still on at the Whitney Museum in New York. And we reprinted 3 original writings of Buckminster Fuller. I think they are also in the selection in the bookstore, which makes me very proud because since they are out, for example, Penguin Books has contacted the estate and asking, why do you publish with this little Swiss publishing house and not with us? The most outstanding instance of this type of book was released in 2002 in collaboration with this institution, the Canadian Centre for Architecture. Once again, the project planner had something modest in mind, a small illustrated collection of essays, faced with the abundance of material and taking advantage of our unique access to the archives of the architects, a redefinition of the significance of illustrations for the publication was found compelling. Editor and exhibition curator Philipp Ursprung and the CCA were prepared to accept my proposal to illustrate the chapters comprehensively with individual portfolios. Not without irony, the design concept relied on the tradition of academic publications. So the typography was, quite blurry, sorry. A sophisticated typography, which you find in academic publications, especially in the tradition of the American East Coast. So the Boston style, I found out, gives some standards, which also means that the book is bleeding, so it's pure white, no bleeding pages, so everything is purely on the page. These are these portfolios of the architects, which are printed on a thinner paper than the essays. Many beautiful objects are also from the collection of this house, like this collection of architecture on porcelain, which I was absolutely blown away to see. So, it also, if we remember academic books in natural history, the title of the book, then this page may remind you about the collections of butterflies, where you pin the butterflies in frames or boxes. And so we did with the architectural models. The cover was black and imageless, but the embossing endowed it with a distinct visual and haptic identity, which was a technical innovation. The bookbinder first said there's no way to have a three-dimensional embossing because the 1.5 millimeter cardboard would never allow showing a third dimension. I had this naive idea that if you put enough pressure on it, it should work. So, well, it took several cliches, you know, the cliche broke after a couple of thousand copies, but with 7 tons, I think, on the size of the cover, it was manageable. Well, the bookbinder never tried again, so I think. Not that I mean to suggest that interference on the part of the publisher should necessarily lead to the scope of each book being doubled. But in most cases, discussions of content and structure takes a different direction, and the design often becomes more independent. It goes without saying that no publisher can muster the necessary editorial resources for such publications on its own. Given the divergent power relations between museum and publisher, a respectful partnership is a decisive precondition for success. If the publisher starts out like a service provider or as the sales guy, then that is what he will remain. Let's see, I think I added some images of the coming publication, which we are working on right now for the current exhibition. It was a pleasure again to structure the content in collaboration with Giovanna Borassi, and also to find a way how the content can find its way into a modest, still modest, but kind of ambitious publication which tries to express something that is significant for the exhibition as well. It means to have a topic or a content which tries to bridge two continents on the same topic, which is building for housing or dwelling. Interesting enough, I did not know the architecture of Stephen Taylor, but since I've been working on this book, I just realized that there's something in British architecture which attracts me very much and which I think makes it very understandable why European culture is so different to Japanese culture. I must say that I don't really believe that I would feel very comfortable living in a house of Nishizawa. Also, I'm very fascinated. It's absolutely astonishing. Well, here you see the difference of two covers in two languages already. Of course, I have my preference. I don't tell you. Well, the book concept tries to embrace the shared part. The center of the book is what we say is the CCA part, the contribution of the CCA, communicating towards both sides with both architects. So starting with one edge is Nishizawa and his architecture. Very atmospheric, as you know. And then we have a paper change, so the center part is printed black and white on uncoated paper with a conversation. And then the third part, or seen from the back of the book, is Taylor's part, with a quite different atmosphere. It's interesting that, again, this material, or the material we had to choose from, shows that architects always try to leave the context out. No architects like to show too much of the neighbor's building. Well, maybe that will change one day. At least they get some people in. But already, also that was quite difficult to achieve. What I also respect very much is that the institution wanted to see the exhibition itself represented in the publication. I think that's, in this case, very meaningful, because the dialogue which happens in the exhibition should continue in the publication. And so I was really happy to see these beautiful exhibition photographs, which makes it worse for once that the publication comes out when the exhibition ends. Now, so either images or readings. Let me see. Okay. I continue here. If a publication is liberated from the pressure of acting only as a document and allowed to develop independently alongside an exhibition or a body of work, then new imaginative scope, new synergies between media may emerge. This is true both for thematic projects as well as for monographs, the latter being more responsive to contextual flattening. Standards and expectations hinder the development of new ideas. Transformations become possible only when you are prepared to break with traditions. Is it permissible to ask whether a publication is required for every exhibition? Or if first success of a design practice is reason enough to publish a book? I'm published, therefore I am. As a result of this obsession, successful architects are often overpublished. The redundance of content is self-evident. All these books will contain the same complete biographies, bibliographies, chronologies of exhibitions, extended catalogues of projects. It seems to me that active architects and designers should feel obliged to maintain an attractive homepage where biographies, bibliographical information, exhibition chronologies, and work catalogues can be regularly updated. The blessings of the Internet. Once an artist has departed this world, there will be time enough to print final versions on paper. Something similar might be considered regarding texts. Why do we waste so much of the writer's and reader's precious time with tedious forewords and introductions dedicated to explaining the importance of the artist or architects and his work? Hasn't our esteem been demonstrated sufficiently by the publication itself? Why not instead devote all this space to the unexpected, to contextualization, to narrative, to insights into process, to questions concerning the how and the why? Concerning the use of photography, it's worth mentioning that even when we take the best images from an architect's archive, they have already been published as full pages in Domus or elsewhere. At times, it is worth searching through discards or to restrict oneself to the icons, or else to produce exclusive new photographic images. Among graphic designers, architectural books are a favorite task. At times, I fall prey to the suspicion that design overkill is permitted to distract from other deficits. Often, by architects and museums, the publisher is chosen too late and on the basis of the lowest price, and is restricted to the possibilities of global marketing. What does it mean to sell 200, 300 exemplars of your publication in Europe? 50 in Japan, 10 in Mexico? Do we owe this to globalization? We know that change means hard work, but it's better to work than to perish. The change has to come from us. We have the privilege of developing new models, setting new standards for the book of tomorrow. Now, this image suggests a second question, which I want to share with you. The question is, are designers and architects political beings? 30 years ago, in tiny Switzerland, we successfully prevented the construction of an atomic power plant. Thanks to protests held in the USA, the Vietnam War had just ended, ushering in far-reaching process of social liberalization both here and in Europe. Back then, my political awakening coincided with the commencement of my design training. We were aware of the risks involved in militant action, but we were also genuinely fascinated with the experience of the power of the street. We designed leaflets and banners and were simultaneously designers and citizens. My best friend at the time was a chef. He treated protesters to his best risotto. He was simultaneously chef and citizen. A valuable experience. No one is solely an architect or a designer. But I have to admit that euphoria diminished rapidly towards the end of my studies, making way for a cowardly pragmatism. Whoever wants to enjoy success as a designer or architect does well to close his or her eyes and ears and fulfill the client's expectations. Ideological convictions are seldom compatible with the substance of one's work. At 17, when I left my parents' house in anger, my father predicted that within 10 years I would be a compliant, well-adjusted member of society. Somehow I managed to keep my rebellious side alive, albeit in retreat, in a kind of inner emigration. How else could I have served governmental institutions and commercial enterprises? Everywhere, people were being blacklisted. Left-wing activists were kept under observation, government dossiers compiled. Today, I can say with relief, if also with exasperation, that I find it much easier to reconcile my political convictions with my work. Did I have to waste so much time? Why couldn't I have done at 30 what I managed to achieve at 50? Of course, such speculations are pointless. And now, if you excuse a short break, I need a glass of water. Well, it was the experience of the years since then that allow me to take an explicit political position today. This highlights the error to which we are liable in younger days. We assume that it's the young who enjoy maximal independence. No so. On the contrary, independence grows with experience and self-awareness. Assuming one's expectations are ideal in character and not material. In any event, the danger of becoming wealthy as an architect or designer is minimal, to say nothing of famous. And don't be deceived by a few exceptions. So, what is at stake? In the end, we need to bring our professional expectations and desires into consonance with our personal and collective hopes and aspirations. How absurd that we need to worry about whether our children will have air to breathe and water to drink, and that such questions invade our work, or that we are converting precious calories into biofuel so we can leave Montreal or Europe, flit around the globe giving lectures or building houses. Fortunately, hype dies down soon enough, and before long China will be built and designed, or else they will decide to send us all home and do the job themselves. Perhaps then we'll turn our attention towards our own problems, using our abilities to solve them instead. Perhaps then architecture and design will have more to offer than mere formal innovation. I myself am simultaneously victim and perpetrator. Of course, it gives me pleasure to see my books distributed worldwide. I like calling Tokyo in the morning and Canada in the evening. It spurs me on to have an ongoing project in this city. But sometimes, something else stirs inside of me. I often recall the convictions of my teachers and mentors. All of them shared a common credo: selection and reduction, doing more with less, reduce to the maximum. You know the slogans. I can name my heroes. Well, these are some commercial examples of my own practice in the older days, like the Swiss Radio Broadcasting Company and Swatch in its early and innovative days. Very commercial, no chance to have any political thoughts in your work. This is my first hero, Richard Paul Lohse, a dogmatic socialist and representative of post-war constructivism. He was strictly systematic and the discoverer of the principle of quantitative chromatic equivalence in art. Bruno Munari, a poet who attempted to make the air visible. This is Josef Müller-Brockmann, a moralist and pioneer of the influential Swiss graphic design of the 50s and 60s. Buckminster Fuller, visionary, inventor, and humanist. An exhibition, as I said, was held at the Whitney Museum. I created books with each, except of Fuller. All of them were my friends. They shared another quality as well. Each was independent in his own way, and each resisted trends and cliches. Everything they did was the result of tremendous conviction and passion. I have attempted to make these qualities my own. My activities as a designer and publisher are shaped by the desire to experience and to learn something new with each project, to work together with good people. I have been lucky. Many projects have fulfilled these criteria. Great talents in architecture, photography, design and art have taught me to see, to recognize quality. For many years now, I have proposed, these are some other heroes, media artists, Victoria Vesna in Los Angeles, or William Forsythe, the choreographer, who is much more than a choreographer, he's a philosopher, I would say. Now, for many years now, I have proposed, edited, designed and published books in the area of architecture, design and art, but only in recent years have I dared to step outside of this niche of beauty, to initiate books that confront the great issues facing humanity, to reincorporate my political convictions into my work. I'm building a large house whose roof is human rights. When it's finished, I plan to publish a book on the theme of life. So there are 3 strong columns carrying that roof. One is about the conditions of life, then the expressions of life and the meaning of life. And this was the first one, the heavy roof. And as I said before, the try is to express a serious topic or theme, mainly visually, also to improve the reality of things. And such books are meant to act or function as an instrument at the time of their appearance, an instrument for discussion, for political negotiations, but soon after they will become documents and document the reality in the specific field at the time of the book's realization. Like this book was published in 2004, and already today we can say, well, what has changed to the good or the bad in terms of human rights? There are, we tried to export the book to China, and the Chinese censorship kind of checked the book and said no way, because there are some images which prove that they really have different opinions about human rights than we do. So the book tries to express the human rights in their respected way in our reality, but also when they are violated or when they are even perverted by people who are not aware of their privilege. The book is built up in 13 chapters. I thought I took out that one because there are too many images. And the text is meant to be, well, as I said, it's 1/3 text, 2/3 images. And this is an execution in China without trial, without, I think they were drug dealers. So the text gives deeper insight into the content. And how is the time? Am I? It's all right? Okay. I think it's important, and also for the designers among you. Well, this is not the place to discuss graphic design in details. It's not about typography anymore. It's about structuring and arranging content. It's more the work of a choreographer, if you want. The spiral you see is the table of content at the same time. It became a spiral because I realized that if you stretch the human rights, if you have a starting point and an ending point, it's not appropriate, because the right to life is definitely the center. So every human right is a consequence. If you respect the right to life, you are obliged to fulfill all the other human rights as well. Like you have to protect people, minorities, and prevent them from discrimination. You have to take care of, you have to feed the people, and as we know, the number of people starving on this planet has increased by almost 10% within 1 year because of the fuel prices and also the stupidity of the Western countries to, as I said, use or produce biofuel to become more independent from whatever sources. The triptychs at the beginning of each chapter try to balance this, the various dimensions of the problem. Maybe important for the readers as well as for designers amongst us. Usually we count the length of a text in characters or words. So we say so and so many words per page, and I found a way for myself in this book, because I wanted to allow reading, but on a, what I say, on the horizontal level as we read images. So I counted the text, length of a text on a spread like this in seconds or minutes rather than in words, to say a reading time between 2 and 3 minutes may be appropriate to keep you going and, you know, to pull you into the text but keep you on the level of reading images, whilst other texts may pull you vertically down and you dig deeper, and you may even dig through the book and out into the internet, where you may find thousands of pages on the same topic. the color was meant, of course, to structure the book, the 13 chapters, but also to absorb or to give a different background or atmosphere to the image, to the photographs, because the book is not about photography. It's not about the beauty of any of these photographs. It's about their content. And of course, in a photographic book, we would never use such a color to support the image. Of course, there is a balance to be found between the factual weight of the image and its pathos, to say, to the emotion. There's a certain vibration in each photograph which you have to consider when you select whether you want more this emotional vibration or whether you want to support the factual meaning of the photograph. I think we registered about 9,000 or 10,000 photographs to make a selection of 600 for the book, so every topic was really carefully researched. When I initiate books like this, of course, I'm a dilettante. I have no idea. I know as little as you do about human rights, and so I always search for a specialist in the field who may accept that the visual impact must be as strong as the written content. Of course, this chapter on torture is not a human right. The meaning is that society must prevent people from torture, of course, protect people. So overall, I think it was very strong introduction of all these various fields of social topics or social content, which I may keep myself busy with in the future, with the repertoire which I have developed as a publisher and a designer over the past 25 years. I'm actually doing the same I did for many books on design and architecture, but I do it in another field which may be important and evident for many more people than just architects and designers. Second book was on water. Who owns the water? This is the title of the German edition. Who owns the water, I think, is a very interesting question, an important question, since we know that especially some very big European companies, but also Coca-Cola, are very busy in buying water sources worldwide and selling bottled water. It's not necessarily mineral water, it's just purified bottled water, and making money by just having these source rights. And we tried to develop a book on water by reflecting on the phenomenon of water. I think it's just a genius molecule which makes us survive, and it has always been there. The book is balancing factual information and the more emotional, kind of maybe also sometimes surprising visuals. Well, this you believe or not, but it's a matter of fact that water theoretically allows you to walk on it, because its surface has this this character. Well, of course, this can only be a rough. Corinne, do you have the water book in the exhibition, in the store? And again, the try to reduce text. There's a lot of text in this book. That's necessary. You need the language to explain. But again, to balance the text and the image. So many people who rarely read books kind of felt obliged to kind of balance the visual impression with kind of factual knowledge by reading. It's also well used, especially in Switzerland, but also in Germany and now new in Great Britain, in high schools on the level of, I think, or college level. And of course you may say that maybe this argumentation or these statements are a bit simple, but they are meant to be simple to pull you into the deeper content without being cliché, actually. That's interesting, I think. Okay. Now we are just about to finish a third publication, which belongs to the third column, the meaning of life, and I will show you in a second. Okay. Well, so the next, what we are working on right now, the title is Faith Is, and it's a book on faith and spirituality, or the phenomenon of faith. Like even this is a photograph. I spoke to the photographer this morning. It is René Bouri. He's a Swiss photographer who is one of the founders of Magnum, the Magnum agency in Paris. And he took this photograph somewhere in Italy in 1956 during an eclipse. Is that an eclipse in the sun? And he said that it was in front of a little cafe somewhere, and the two men were strictly communists, right? So atheists in their own beliefs, but this gesture is this kind of, there is something greater, you know, whether you believe in whatever you believe, but there is something, there is a dimension which goes beyond our understanding or our, and I think that's actually what the book should be about. It's not at all about religion. It's about the search for understanding. It's about the phenomenon of faith, and it's something that is the book is addressed to people who may consider themselves as searchers. I'm a searcher. I think that will go on for a while. And it has to do with the balance we have to find in these secular systems we live in, where we kind of separate this kind of the management of our everyday life and the meaning of life. So, and I think we are all more or less busy in finding this balance and searching for explanation to the big questions. If you read the papers last week, there is this in Geneva, in Switzerland, this huge, I couldn't say in English, but sorry? Yes, exactly. And they are searching for the God. Yeah, okay, right. So there's some little piece missing, right, in the understanding or explanation of the universe, and I think it's really interesting that even scientists have this kind of vibration feeling that there may be something really big out there. Anyway, the book again tries to give us little reference to religions as possible. Of course there are some, because religion is not something bad but it especially searches for this fascination of maybe of a spiritual moment in everyday life. And of course these guys try to find explanation, Jean-Paul Sartre and Einstein, as well as these people do. Oh, sorry. And since we have these telescopes looking far out, we may really believe that the universe is expanding, and it makes us even smaller than we are. Then we try to recreate. Oh, sorry. We aren't even satisfied by the reality of sunset every day. This is an installation by artist Olafur Eliasson in the Tate Modern in London, where he installed a huge sun, and there were 2 million visitors, and they laid on the ground watching the sun. But you could even see the installation behind the sun. But obviously the artificial is strong enough to create this moment of fascination. Anyway, there will be some interesting text to read, and the background of the text is, for example, giving the chemical elements which everything is made of. This is actually from the CERN. This is one of these small pieces. Okay, now I'm close to the end. I call these books visual reader, as said, because they demand from us an intensive confrontation with their visual contents. The truth and the reality of these contents is registered in ways that are beyond dispute. The choice of illustration and their choreographic arrangements compels me to make rigorous selections. My criteria are at once intuitive and rational. Because I make a real effort to distance these books from institutional interest and to maintain their independence, they have credibility and, when necessary, are also politically incorrect. We need to know the rules in order to break them when we decide it is needed. Or, as we said back in the 70s, in the words of Bob Dylan, to live outside the law, you must be honest. Thank you very much.
Just mention a few things. So thank you very much, Lars. We can have some questions if you want. They're going to be recorded as the lecture for the CCA archive. So if you have any question, please raise your hand. Also some political questions if you want.
Hi, I was wondering, like, when you're creating a book, your considerations of the impact of the object in terms of your choice of paper, your choice of size, and how it's going to be distributed. What is, your thoughts on that?
What is the question?
How does your book impact the environment?
Okay. The environment, ecologically.
What kind of paper, for example, do you choose?
Okay, well, okay, good question. But it's something I was glad Mirko even mentioned, because that's our private discussion, that we say, oh, is that travel really necessary? Do I have to go there? Do I have to publish that book? And when the book on human rights became 700 pages, I felt so guilty. I thought, but we would have needed 1,000 pages, in fact. So, yeah, I am aware of that. And of course, what we do in production, we select paper which is, of course, acid-free and recycled, if good enough. The cover of the human rights book is recycled cotton fiber, and was produced in India. Was this kind of naive idea of paying back something. I shouldn't have done it. It was a disaster. But anyway, yes, I am aware, but I don't know. I can't change it. If we produce, we pollute. I think it's you can't avoid it, but you can be aware of, if the content is meaningful or thoughtful. I think you have a right to produce. You have the right to use sources.
I'm not sure if it's you who started it or if it's somebody else. I just recognize that there are a couple of independent publishers actually publishing these really fat books. These really thick books of at least 700 pages. Yours is one. Then recently there's The Chinese Dream by Lars Müller. And then Scarlo's last book actually was also like a Bible on peace women. And I found that interesting also in relation to the picture you were showing of that big Newton book. I'm not sure if I could constate it as a trend or so, or if it's really a series of books, if they have anything to do with each other, but still I find it interesting that, and König was doing this fat Immendorf Bible, so I sort of find it interesting that suddenly, the size becomes of importance apparently in independent publishing, or is it just all an accident? I mean, maybe it's also not...
I wouldn't say it hasn't to do with independent publishing or not. I think there's some content that just search for specific formats. But of course, that's why I say I feel guilty if the book is heavy like it is. But there are some limitations to the book. So above 1,000 pages, I think there is little chance. If we remember how it started, it was the small, medium, large, X-large of Bruce Mao, which, for my generation at least, kind of made it possible to think big like this. But of course, and then the Dutch came, so that's in the field of architecture, MV, Van Berkel, they came up with fat books, Pharmax was the first, and then you realize that, of course, your archive, your documentary would allow books of 1,000 pages easily. But then actually selection should come in. And I can say these books, these images are very well selected. You may still say there are too many, but they are selected. 600 from 10,000. And if you feel that you need many to improve, then you just arrive having a fat book. Now, in architecture, I doubt if any of these fat books make sense. I think it's more a manifesto in itself. And there is one book of design colleagues in Holland, Kessels Kramer. I don't know if they are known here. They did a very interesting, nice contribution at the Venice Architecture Biennale together with Droog Design. They presented a book on which the title was 2 Kilo Kessels Kramer. So they actually took care of the paper, just adding paper, so the book made 2 kilo. And I think that's ridiculous in a way. And that's really not very responsible for in environmental context. But I would say there have always been thick books, and maybe today they are still thick books, and maybe they have a little less reason to be that thick. Okay.
Hi. When you talk about the book being superior to the digital medium for knowledge storage, do you see this as a technological restriction of digital storage and access, or do you find something inherent in the book object? There was a time when, before the internet, let's say really 25 years ago, when I started, when I had first discussions on interaction in media, how do we interact, or what does interaction mean in media? And the thing is that there is no medium more interactive than the book. Now, if you have knowledge stored in a book, maybe you have an lexicon, an encyclopedia at home, right? You may look something up, and you will, and maybe it's a short note you want to find, but you will find yourself reading in this encyclopedia for hours. And that will probably happen to you in the internet as well, but with much less systematic reception of knowledge. And I just mean that the internet is, or the electronic storage of information is not reliable. It's only reliable if you know where to look up what, right? But if you have this kind of vague knowledge or information, I think nothing is better than the encyclopedia on paper. And then we know that the technology is not reliable either, because there is in these very few years, let's say in the past 20 years, we have gone through 5 different generations of technological generations of storing, and I don't know if this answers your question. Yeah, that's actually.
So, but I'm the man of the book, right? So I defend the paper and I defend the book, and I love to look up the timetable on the internet.
Thank you. very much appreciated your talk and the way your publishing house, or the way you yourself put together a book in a way that brings reading to another level and sort of integrates ideas of presentation and design and brings together photo and text. And I found that quite interesting, sort of on a personal level, how the book relates to the reader. And I was wondering if you could talk about how your company relates to sort of the readership at large through marketing and through distribution, and how sort of the product works in today's age to get to that public.
Okay, let me give you an example. If you have a book of 2 kilo produced in Europe, say Switzerland, and you want to get it over to Montreal. Today you may face shipping costs, which depends on how fast you want to get it over, but shipping costs which easily can be half of the retail price. So you just add these costs to the price and the book will become really expensive. Now, if this is said, you may see how the book will lose probably more and more on the mass market, but may become more and more valuable for what I say, that there's a nice sharing system in books which is called libraries, right? It's much nicer to share a book in a library than to share any information on the internet. So I think that's why the book will last. And now we would ship less books to Montreal, but they may find their way to places where they may be shared by many more people, right? So now we have to make a living out of this. So the cost per book must grow, must increase. And to the experience of the publisher, after 25 years now, I kind of escaped into a safe collaboration with a larger company, because there was no way to survive as an independent distribution structure. But building up distribution facilities worldwide was half of the job, right? And then finally you are proud to sell books to New Zealand, but you never get the money back. So you think, should I go for it or not? And I think that's the problem, and that's the disadvantage of the book. And now if we watch the fuel prices and the cost of transportation, and that may speed up the invention of print on demand, on to say, let's ship the data, right? But get the hardware production made in New Zealand or wherever. And there, of course, as a designer, I suffer again, because I love to keep control over the production and the paper quality and the printing quality and so on. But I think that's probably the reality to make the book, to keep the book alive.
Thank you for the wonderful talk. I'd like to hear you say a few words about one of my favorite books, which is a cover story about the ECM covers. And also I'm wondering if you'd ever consider reprinting this volume.
Okay, so good news for you. Well, it's nice to hear that people have their personal favorites out of my program. Well, not very many people will know about this book. It has been out of print for several years. It's you have a chance on the internet. I think it's $250 somehow, something like now, which I don't understand. I think, well, it's interesting to see how some books
kind of will increase in value, while other books are remaindered and sold for $5 after $50 in original. Anyway, the ECM cover book, which was one of the early successes in my program, it's an edition of 10,000, which was surprisingly high at that time. There will be a second volume or a follow-up, which is the continuation of the ECM. ECM is a record label in Munich. You may know through the music of Keith Jarrett and Chick Corea and Jan Garbarek or Arvo Pärt and some others. Beautiful sleeves, even in the small CD disc format, and we will do a new book on the continuation on the photographic sleeves, and that will contain the complete catalog again, and that will come out next year in summer. And again, there the music business suffers even more than the book business, because it becomes really obvious that if you can download the music data, it's more comfortable. You carry your entire music library with you on your little iPod, and I think, and there, as designers, we also lose something. When we used to design the vinyl record covers, that was almost as important as posters in Switzerland. That was really a privilege, and then you had to learn to reduce to the small format, and now it disappears completely, and you download the liner notes from the internet, right? So I'm missing actually the image to the music. I think it's important to have. So you can look forward to next year.
Actually, I'm thinking there are parallels between what you do and what Manfred Eicher at ECM does, because you're so hands-on.
Yeah, we feel very, very familiar, very, similar. All right.
So perhaps
that was it. Thank you very much for your patience.